Maria Rodriguez pressed her forehead against the cold bathroom tile, her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for weeks. The door was locked. She couldn't let Emma see her like this. Not again. Through the crack beneath the door, she could see her daughter's tiny feet, perfectly still on the living room carpet. Emma hadn't moved in 47 minutes. Maria knew because she'd been counting. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days of silence. That's how long it had been since Emma was born, and not once had Maria heard her baby girl say, "Mama." Not once had Emma cried out when she fell and scraped her knee. Not once had she laughed at a funny face or sung along to a lullaby. The silence had become a living thing in their small Columbus apartment, a presence that filled every room, suffocated every conversation, and turned every milestone into a reminder of what should have been. "Maria, you okay in there?" Carlos's voice came through the door, gentle but strained. He'd aged 10 years in the last 3. The laugh lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent grooves of worry. "I'm fine," Maria lied, splashing cold water on her face. She stared at her reflection, red eyes, hollow cheeks, hair she'd forgotten to brush that morning. When had she become this person? The diagnosis came when Emma was 18 months old. Autism spectrum disorder severe, Dr. Patterson had said, his voice clinically detached. Nonverbal. She may never develop functional speech. He'd handed them a stack of pamphlets about special schools and therapy programs, then moved on to his next patient, leaving Maria and Carlos sitting in that sterile office, their world crumbling. They tried everything. Speech therapy 3 times a week at $150 per session, money they didn't have, borrowed from Carlos's mother who could barely afford it herself. Applied behavioral analysis therapy that made Emma scream and hide under her bed. Occupational therapy, sensory integration therapy, gluten-free diets, weighted blankets, special vitamins that cost $200 a bottle and did absolutely nothing. Emma's therapist, Miss Jenny, had been optimistic at first. "Some children are just late bloomers," she'd said 6 months ago, her smile bright and encouraging. But last week that smile had faded. "Maria Carlos," she'd said carefully, "I think we need to adjust our expectations. Emma may find other ways to communicate, gestures, pictures, technology, but verbal speech. We might need to accept that it's not going to happen." Accept it, as if silence was just another household item to arrange around, like furniture. Carlos worked the night shift at the automotive plant and picked up weekend construction jobs. Maria had quit her job as a dental assistant to stay home with Emma full-time. The special needs daycare wanted $2,000 a month, might as well have asked for the moon. They'd burned through their savings, maxed out 2 credit cards, and were 3 months behind on rent. Their landlord, Mr. Chen, had been patient, but his patience was wearing thin. Every morning, Maria woke up hopping. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today Emma would look at her and say something, anything. Every night, she went to bed with that hope crushed a little more. The worst part wasn't the silence itself. It was not knowing what Emma needed. When she stood by the refrigerator, was she hungry or just staring at the hum of the motor? When tears rolled down her cheeks, was she in pain, scared, frustrated, or just processing some internal storm Maria couldn't see? It was like living with a beautiful ghost, present but unreachable. Maria opened the bathroom door and found Carlos sitting on the floor next to Emma. Their daughter was arranging her alphabet blocks in a perfect line, touching each one precisely 3 times before moving to the next. Always 3 times. Always the same order. "Maria," Carlos said softly, looking up at his wife. "I got an email about that community event at Goodell Park today. The police department is doing demonstrations. There's music, food trucks. Maybe we could take Emma, get out of the apartment for a while." Maria's first instinct was to say no. Emma didn't do well with crowds. The last time they'd tried taking her to a family birthday party, she'd had a complete meltdown, screaming, hitting herself, inconsolable for hours afterward. But looking at Carlos's hopeful face, at the dark circles under his eyes that matched her own, she couldn't bring herself to refuse. "Okay," she whispered, "let's try." What Maria didn't know, what none of them could have possibly known, was that this simple decision to visit a park on an ordinary Saturday would change everything. In 3 hours, their silent daughter would speak for the first time. In 3 days, they'd be on national television. In 3 months, Emma's story would inspire a movement that would help hundreds of children find their voices. But right now, in this moment, all Maria knew was the weight of 3 years of silence and a flickering hope she was almost afraid to feel. She knelt beside Emma, gently touching her daughter's soft brown hair. Emma didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the touch. She just kept arranging her blocks, 3 touches each, always 3. "Baby girl," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "I know you're in there somewhere, I know you are. And I'm not giving up. I promise you I'm not giving up." Emma's hand paused, just for a second, on the letter R, then she continued her ritual, lost in her own world. Carlos stood and wrapped his arms around Maria from behind. They stood there together, watching their daughter, 2 parents holding onto each other in the wreckage of their dreams, neither of them knowing that in just a few hours everything would change. The clock on the wall ticked toward 2 p.m. Goodell Park was waiting, and so was a German shepherd named Rex who had a gift nobody understood, a gift that would shatter the silence that had ruled their lives for 3 unbearable years. Maria grabbed her purse and Emma's emergency bag, headphones for noise sensitivity, her favorite blue blanket, crackers she'd actually eat, a change of clothes in case of accidents. The same routine they followed everywhere, preparing for every possible catastrophe. "Come on, Emma," Carlos said gently, offering his hand. "Let's go to the park." Emma stood up, not taking his hand. She never did, but following behind them like a shadow. Silent, always silent. They had no idea they were walking toward a miracle. Officer Jake Mitchell checked his watch. 1:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the next K9 demonstration. He knelt beside Rex, his 5-year-old German shepherd partner, and adjusted the dog's police vest. Rex's tail thumped against the grass in that steady, reliable way that had gotten Mitchell through some of the darkest days of his life. "You ready, boy?" Mitchell asked, scratching behind Rex's ears. The dog's brown eyes looked up at him with an intelligence that still startled him sometimes, even after 3 years of partnership. Around them, Goodell Park buzzed with activity. Children shrieked on the playground, families spread blankets on the grass, and the smell of food trucks, barbecue, funnel cakes, and roasted corn drifted through the warm September air. It was the kind of perfect community event that the Columbus Police Department loved to sponsor. Good PR, building trust, showing citizens that cops were human beings, not just uniforms and badges. But Mitchell had another reason for being here, one he'd never told anyone. Not his captain, not his fellow officers, not even his wife Sarah. Because what he discovered about Rex 2 years ago was something that defied logic, something that would sound crazy if he tried to explain it. Rex could heal broken minds. It had happened at Lincoln Elementary School on March 14, 2023, a date burned into Mitchell's memory forever. Active shooter. Mitchell and Rex had been 3 blocks away when the call came in. They'd arrived within minutes, Rex leading him through the chaos of screaming children and terrified teachers. The shooter had already been subdued by Coach Henderson, who tackled him in the hallway, but the damage was done. 2 teachers wounded, 12 children traumatized. Rex had pulled Mitchell to classroom 4B, his nose working frantically. Inside a storage locker, they'd found 8-year-old Timothy Chen, curled into a ball so tight he looked like he might disappear into himself. The boy's eyes were open but vacant, his body rigid with shock. He'd witnessed the shooter kill his best friend. The school counselor couldn't reach him. The paramedics couldn't reach him. Timothy hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked since they'd carried him out of that classroom. Mitchell had tried to coax the boy out of the locker, but Timothy just stared through him like he was glass. Then Rex had done something extraordinary. Without any command, the dog had lowered himself to the ground and army crawled toward the boy, his body language completely submissive. He'd laid his head on Timothy's lap and simply waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Mitchell's legs cramped from crouching, but Rex didn't move. Neither did Timothy. The paramedics started talking about sedation, about psychiatric holds, about the trauma team at Children's Hospital. Then so quietly Mitchell almost missed it, Timothy's hand moved. His fingers touched Rex's fur, and he whispered one word, "Stay." It was like watching someone surface from deep water, gasping for air. Timothy's eyes focused, his breathing steadied, his rigid body relaxed. Within 30 minutes, he was talking to the crisis counselor. Within a week, he was back at school. His therapist called it remarkable resilience. His parents called it a miracle. But Mitchell knew the truth. It was Rex. He'd started paying attention after that, watching Rex interact with people, especially children. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense distress, to know exactly how to approach someone in crisis. Mitchell had seen him calm panic attacks, soothe crying toddlers, and bring comfort to domestic violence victims who couldn't trust another human being. But Mitchell kept quiet about it. How could he explain that his K-9 partner, trained for narcotics detection and criminal apprehension, seemed to have some kind of therapeutic gift? His fellow officers already teased him about being too soft, too sensitive. If he started talking about Rex's healing abilities, they'd think he'd lost his mind. So he'd requested these community events, volunteered for school visits, found excuses to bring Rex into contact with people who needed him. Unofficially, quietly. It wasn't protocol, wasn't in any training manual, but Mitchell couldn't ignore what he'd seen. "Mitchell," Sergeant Barnes waved from the demonstration area. 5 minutes. Mitchell stood, his knees popping. He was only 34 but felt 50 after 12 years on the force. "Come on, Rex, time to show off." They walked toward the roped-off area where a crowd had gathered. Mitchell went through the standard routine, demonstrating Rex's obedience commands, his ability to detect hidden substances, his protective instincts. The crowd applauded. Children asked to pet him. Parents took photos. It was all normal, familiar routine. Then Mitchell felt Rex's body go tense beneath his hand. The dog's ears pricked forward, his entire focus zeroing in on something in the crowd. Mitchell followed his gaze and saw a little girl, maybe 3 years old, dark curly hair, wearing a yellow sundress with butterflies. She stood absolutely still about 30 feet away, staring at Rex with an intensity that raised the hair on Mitchell's arms. There was something different about this child. The way she held herself, separate from the world around her. Her mother hovered nearby, protective and watchful in a way that spoke of constant vigilance. Mitchell recognized that look. He'd seen it on parents of special needs children before. Rex whined softly, a sound Mitchell had only heard a handful of times. The dog shifted his weight, leaning forward like he was being pulled by an invisible string. "Easy, boy," Mitchell murmured, his hand tightening on Rex's collar. But Rex wasn't acting aggressive. This was different. This was that same focused intensity he'd shown with Timothy Chen, that same certainty that someone needed him. The little girl took a step forward, then another. Her mother noticed, reaching out. "Emma, no." But Emma ducked under the safety rope with surprising speed, heading straight toward Rex. The crowd gasped. Mitchell's training kicked in: secure the dog, protect the child, control the situation. But something stopped him. Some instinct deeper than training told him to wait, to watch, to let this moment unfold. Rex pulled forward gently, not aggressively. Mitchell's fingers loosened on the collar. The little girl walked toward them like she was being drawn by gravity, her eyes never leaving Rex's face. She should have been scared. Rex was an imposing dog, 85 pounds of muscle and intensity. Children usually approached cautiously, asking permission, hiding behind parents. But this child showed no fear, only purpose. Rex lowered himself to the ground, his body language completely non-threatening. Then he did something Mitchell had never seen him do before. He bowed, front legs extended, rear end up, head lowered in a posture of complete submission. The crowd fell silent. Mitchell's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed that he should intervene, should pull the child back to safety, should follow protocol. But his hand stayed frozen on Rex's collar, and he found himself holding his breath. The little girl, Emma, stopped 3 feet away. Her small hand reached out, trembling slightly. Her mother was crying now. Mitchell could hear it, but he couldn't look away from the child and his dog. Emma's fingers touched Rex's fur. And then she opened her mouth. Mitchell's body camera was recording. The crowd was watching. The moment stretched like taffy, like time itself was holding its breath. What happened next would change everything Mitchell thought he knew about healing, about connection, about the mysterious bond between humans and animals. It would validate everything he'd secretly believed about Rex, everything he'd been afraid to say out loud. Emma leaned close to Rex's ear, her lips moving. 2 words, just 2 simple words. But they would echo around the world. Maria Rodriguez's world tilted sideways, the moment Emma slipped under that rope. Emma, no, the words ripped from her throat, primal and terrified. Her daughter, her precious, fragile, unpredictable daughter, was running toward a police dog, not walking, running. Emma, who couldn't handle the neighbor's chihuahua barking through the fence. Emma, who screamed and hid when they passed dogs on the sidewalk. Emma, who had once had a complete meltdown because a dog appeared on the television screen. Maria lunged forward, but Carlos caught her arm. "Wait," he said, his voice strange and tight. "Just wait." "Are you insane?" Maria tried to wrench free, but Carlos's grip was iron. "That's a police dog," he could. "Look at her, Maria, really look." Maria's panic-flooded brain forced itself to focus. Emma wasn't running in the chaotic, uncontrolled way she moved during her meltdowns. This was purposeful, directed. Emma's eyes were locked on the German Shepherd with a focus Maria had never seen before. Not on her toys, not on her alphabet blocks, not even on the ceiling fan she could stare at for hours. This was different. Officer Mitchell's hand moved toward his dog's collar, his body language shifting into alert readiness. Maria saw it happening in slow motion, the officer preparing to pull the dog back, to protect her daughter from what everyone assumed would be a disaster. But the dog moved first. Rex, that's what the officer had called him during the demonstration, lowered himself to the ground in one fluid motion. Not aggressive, not defensive. It was almost like submission. No, that wasn't right. It was more like an invitation. The massive German Shepherd, trained to chase down criminals and detect drugs, was making himself smaller, less threatening. Then he bowed. "Oh my God," someone in the crowd whispered. Emma stopped 3 feet away from Rex, her small body perfectly still. Maria's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Emma, to pull her back to safety. But something deeper held her frozen, some ancient part of her brain that recognized this moment as significant beyond her understanding. Emma's hand lifted, trembling in the air between her and the dog. Her fingers were splayed wide in that way she did when she was overwhelmed, when sensory input became too much. But she wasn't pulling back. She was reaching forward. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the children had stopped playing. Maria could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could hear Carlos's ragged breathing beside her, could hear the distant sound of traffic on High Street. The whole world had narrowed to this moment, her daughter and a police dog, connected by something invisible and powerful. Emma's fingers touched Rex's fur. The contact seemed to send an electric current through her small body. Her whole frame shuddered, but not with fear. Maria knew her daughter's fear responses intimately, the rigid muscles, the wide eyes, the stopped breathing. This wasn't fear. This was recognition. Emma's face transformed. Her usually blank expression, The mask that made strangers uncomfortable, that made other parents pull their children away, melted into something Maria had only seen in her dreams. Joy. Pure, radiant, unmistakable joy. Tears flooded Maria's vision, but she blinked them back furiously. She couldn't miss a second of this. Emma leaned closer to Rex, her small hand moving from the top of his head down to his neck, feeling his fur, his warmth, his solid reality. The dog remained perfectly still, only his eyes moving, tracking Emma's face with an intensity that seemed almost human. Officer Mitchell stood frozen, his hand still hovering near Rex's collar but not touching. Maria saw the confusion on his face, the wonder, the same sense that something unprecedented was happening. Emma's lips moved. At first Maria thought she'd imagined it. 3 years of desperate hopping can make you see things that aren't there. But then Emma's lips moved again, forming shapes they'd never formed before. Her mouth opened, her tongue touched her teeth, her vocal cords, silent for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, vibrated. "Good dog." The words were quiet, slightly slurred. The sound wasn't quite right and the G was soft, but they were words, real words, spoken words. Words that came from Emma's mouth, from her voice, from some locked room inside her that had suddenly, impossibly, opened. Maria's scream shattered the silence. It wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was raw, overwhelming joy erupting from the deepest part of her soul. Her legs gave out, and she dropped to her knees on the grass, her hands pressed against her mouth, tears streaming down her face in rivers. "She spoke," Maria sobbed. "Carlos, she spoke, our baby spoke." Carlos was crying too, his face crumpled with emotion as he sank down beside his wife. Other people in the crowd were crying now, strangers wiping their eyes, mothers clutching their own children tighter. Even tough-looking men in motorcycle jackets were blinking rapidly and looking away. Officer Mitchell's hands were shaking. Maria saw it from 20 feet away, the big, strong police officer's hands trembling as he stared at Emma and Rex. His body camera light blinked steadily, recording everything. Emma seemed oblivious to the chaos around her. She wrapped her small arms around Rex's neck, pressing her face into his fur. The dog remained still, but his tail began to wag, slow, gentle, purposeful. His eyes closed and he leaned slightly into Emma's embrace, accepting it, returning it in his own way. "Good dog," Emma said again, clearer this time, then again. "Good dog, good dog, good dog." Each repetition was stronger, more confident. Maria watched her daughter's mouth forming words, watched her throat working, watched her body relaxing into the moment in a way she'd never relaxed before. No self-stimming behaviors, no repetitive hand movements, no rocking, just Emma, fully present, speaking. Maria tried to stand but couldn't. Her legs wouldn't work. Carlos pulled her up, and they stumbled forward together, breaking through the crowd that had unconsciously formed a circle around Emma and Rex. "Emma," Maria whispered, dropping to her knees beside her daughter. "Baby, you talked, you said words, you—" Her voice broke and she couldn't continue. Emma turned to look at her mother, and for the first time in 3 years their eyes truly met. Not the vacant stare Maria had grown accustomed to, not the looking-through-you gaze that made her feel invisible. This was eye contact. Real, meaningful, present eye contact. "Mama," Emma said. The word was imperfect, the "I" sound's not quite right, but it was there. It was real. Maria pulled her daughter into her arms, feeling Emma's small body against hers, and sobbed like her heart was breaking and healing at the same time. Carlos wrapped his arms around both of them, his shoulders shaking with silent tears. Officer Mitchell stood above them, one hand resting on Rex's head, his face wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "I've seen a lot of things on this job," he said, his voice rough, "but I've never seen anything like this. Never." Around them, the crowd erupted in applause. Strangers cheered and cried and hugged each other. Someone was filming on their phone, several people actually. The moment was being captured, preserved, about to be shared with the world. But Maria didn't care about any of that. She held Emma tight, feeling her daughter's heartbeat, hearing her voice, that impossible, beautiful voice, whispering good dog, good dog, good dog against her shoulder. The silence that had ruled their lives for 3 unbearable years had finally, miraculously, ended. And it had taken just 2 words, time fractured into before and after. Before Emma spoke, the world was one way, silent, hopeless, suffocating. After those 2 words left her lips, reality rearranged itself into something new, something impossible, something that defied every medical diagnosis and shattered every limitation the doctors had placed on their lives. Maria couldn't stop touching Emma's face, her hair, her hands, as if confirming her daughter was real, that this moment was real, that she wasn't trapped in some desperate fever dream. Emma tolerated the touch in a way she never had before, leaning into her mother's embrace instead of pulling away. "Say it again, baby," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "Please say it again." Emma looked at her mother with those dark brown eyes that suddenly seemed to see everything. Her mouth opened, and Maria held her breath, the entire universe suspended in the space between seconds. "Mama," Emma said, then turning to Carlos, "Dada." Carlos made a sound like he'd been punched in the chest. He dropped to the grass completely, his face buried in his hands, his body shaking with the kind of sobs that come from years of accumulated grief finally finding release. His little girl had just called him Dada. After 3 years of wondering if she even knew who he was, if she recognized him as her father, if she loved him, now he knew. She knew. She'd always known. Officer Mitchell wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, not even trying to hide the tears anymore. "Rex," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder, "what did you do, buddy? What the hell did you do?" Rex's tail continued its steady wag, his eyes moving between Emma and Mitchell with what could only be described as satisfaction. The dog knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew what he'd done. "Officer," a woman pushed through the crowd, her phone held high, filming. "Officer Mitchell, I'm Sandra Chen with Channel 7 News. Can you tell us what just happened here?" Mitchell blinked at her, his police training struggling to resurface through the emotion. I don't know. This little girl, Emma, she's been nonverbal, autistic, and she spoke to my dog, her first words ever." "Can we interview the family?" Sandra was already moving toward Maria and Carlos, her cameraman following. "No," Mitchell said firmly, stepping between them. "No cameras, not right now, give them space." But there were already a dozen phones pointed at them, recording, photographing. The moment was escaping, spreading, becoming public property. Maria saw the phones but couldn't process what it meant. Her entire world was Emma's voice, Emma's words, Emma's breakthrough. "Good dog," Emma said again, reaching for Rex. "Good dog won't stay." 4 words, then 5, then 6. Each sentence imperfect but understandable, each word a small miracle stacked on top of the last. Dr. Marcus Webb pushed through the crowd, his doctor's bag in hand. He'd been volunteering at the first aid tent, treating scraped knees and heat exhaustion. "I'm a pediatrician," he said to Mitchell. "I heard the commotion. May I?" Mitchell looked at Maria, who nodded through her tears. Dr. Webb knelt beside Emma, his movements slow and careful. "Hello, Emma. My name is Dr. Webb. Can you tell me your name?" Emma looked at him for a long moment, then clearly Emma. Dr. Webb's professional composure cracked. "Extraordinary," he breathed. "Absolutely extraordinary. How long has she been nonverbal?" "Her whole life," Carlos managed, his voice wrecked. 3 years, she's never spoken before, not once." That's not how this works," Dr. Webb said, shaking his head. "Language development doesn't just suddenly appear like this. There are stages, progressions. You don't go from completely nonverbal to forming sentences in minutes. It's neurologically impossible." "Well, apparently nobody told Emma that," Maria said, laughing and crying at the same time. Dr. Webb pulled out his phone. "I need to document this. With your permission, I'd like to record a brief examination. This could be significant for autism research." "No," Maria said firmly. "Not right now. Right now, she's just my daughter and she's talking and I just need." She couldn't finish. The enormity of it was too much. 3 years of speech therapy, of expensive interventions, of specialists telling her to accept that Emma would never speak. 3 years of wondering what her daughter's voice sounded like, what words she might say, what thoughts lived behind those silent eyes. And now, in the span of 5 minutes, everything had changed. Emma tugged on Maria's sleeve. "Mama," she said, then pointed at Rex. "Dog, good dog, Emma like dog." 7 words, 8, 9. They were coming faster now, tumbling out like water breaking through a dam. Not perfect, not grammatically correct, but real. Communication, connection. Officer Mitchell's radio crackled. "Mitchell, what's your status? We're getting reports of some kind of incident at your location." Mitchell unclipped the radio. "No incident, dispatch, just something good happened, something really good." "Copy that. Captain wants to see you when you're done there." Mitchell looked at his body camera, the small red light still blinking. Everything had been recorded. Emma's first words, her family's reaction, the impossible moment when silence became speech. The footage would be reviewed, filed, probably forgotten in some digital archive. Or so he thought. Sergeant Barnes approached, his expression confused. "Mitchell, what's going on? People are crying. Someone said a kid started talking." "This is Emma," Mitchell said, gesturing. "She's autistic, nonverbal, or she was until about 10 minutes ago when she met Rex." Barnes stared at Emma, who was now chattering to Rex in broken sentences, telling him about her blocks, her room, her favorite blanket. "You're telling me your dog made a nonverbal autistic kid talk?" "I'm not telling you anything," Mitchell said carefully. "I'm just telling you what I witnessed." Barnes looked at Rex with new eyes. "That's the same dog who found the Chen kid during the Lincoln Elementary situation." Mitchell's head snapped around. "How did you know about that?" "I read your report. You said Rex showed unusual sensitivity to the boy's trauma." Barnes crossed his arms. "Mitchell, how long have you known your dog can do this?" Before Mitchell could answer, Emma stood up and walked to Rex, throwing her small arms around his neck again. "Love you, dog," she said clearly. "Emma, love you." The crowd, which had grown to nearly 100 people, erupted in fresh applause and tears. Maria's phone rang. Then Carlos's. Then Maria's again. The video was already spreading. Someone had posted it on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok. The notifications were coming in waves. Shares, comments, messages from people they hadn't spoken to in years. "Maria," Carlos said, staring at his phone, his face pale. "We're going viral." Maria looked up from Emma, confusion cutting through her joy. "What?" "The video, someone posted it. It already has 50,000 views. 60,000, 70, he stopped, refreshing. 120,000 views in the last 3 minutes. The world was about to discover Emma's miracle. And nothing would ever be the same again. By 6 p.m. that evening, the video had 3 million views. By midnight, 15 million. By Sunday morning, Emma Rodriguez was the most talked about person in America. Maria sat on their worn couch, Emma curled against her side, watching their own story play out on the television screen. CNN had picked it up first. Then ABC, NBC, Fox News, BBC, Al Jazeera. The footage from Officer Mitchell's body camera had been released, with their permission, and now the entire world was watching the moment Emma spoke her first words. "This is insane," Carlos said, staring at his phone, which hadn't stopped buzzing in 12 hours. "We have 3,000 messages, 3,000. Opera's people called, Opera Maria." Maria couldn't process it. 24 hours ago, she'd been sobbing on her bathroom floor, drowning in hopelessness. Now her daughter was talking, really talking, and somehow the entire planet knew about it. "Mama, phone loud," Emma said, pressing her hands over her ears. Her words were still imperfect, still emerging like a butterfly from a chrysalis, but they were there. Real, constant. "Sorry, baby." Carlos silenced his phone, then Maria's, then the landline they barely used. But the emails kept coming, the social media notifications, the requests for interviews, the messages from strangers telling them their own stories of autism, of silence, of hope. Dr. Patricia Chen from Stanford called at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. Maria almost didn't answer. She'd been up all night, watching Emma sleep, listening to her daughter's breathing, terrified that she'd wake up and the miracle would be gone. "Mrs. Rodriguez, my name is Dr. Patricia Chen. I'm a neurologist specializing in autism spectrum disorders. I saw the video of Emma and I have to tell you, what happened to your daughter shouldn't be possible." Maria's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Language acquisition doesn't work this way. Children don't go from completely nonverbal to speaking in sentences within hours. The neural pathways required for speech take years to develop. Emma's breakthrough defies everything we understand about brain development and autism." "Are you saying it's fake?" Maria's voice turned sharp, protective. "Because I was there. I heard my daughter speak. Those weren't her first words, they were the beginning of hundreds of words." No, Dr. Chen said quickly. "I believe it happened. I'm saying it's neurologically unprecedented. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to study Emma. With your permission, I'd like to bring a team to Columbus, perform some scans, document her progress. This could change how we understand autism treatment." Maria looked at Emma, who was sitting on the floor building a tower with her blocks and narrating each placement. "Blue block goes here. Now red block. Now yellow block go on top." "I don't want her to be a science experiment," Maria said. "I understand. But think about all the other families out there, all the other children locked in silence. If we can understand what happened to Emma, maybe we can help them too." Maria closed her eyes. She thought about the support group she'd attended once, a room full of exhausted parents with hollow eyes, all of them carrying the same weight of unspoken words. She thought about Timothy's mother, whose son still hadn't spoken despite years of therapy. She thought about all the mothers crying on bathroom floors, wondering if they'd ever hear their children's voices. "Okay," she whispered, "but Emma comes first. If she gets upset if it's too much, we stop." "Of course. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. You're giving hope to millions of families." By Monday morning, Dr. Chen had arrived with a team of 5 researchers from Stanford. They set up equipment in a conference room at Children's Hospital, treating Emma like the precious miracle she was. Brain scans, language assessments, developmental evaluations, all done with patience and care. The results came back that afternoon. "Impossible," Dr. Chen said, staring at the brain scans. "Look at this. Her language centers, the Broca's area, the Wernicke's area, they're lighting up like a Christmas tree. This level of activity, Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's brain is rewiring itself in real time." "What does that mean?" Carlos asked. "It means that whatever happened when she interacted with that dog triggered something fundamental in her neurology. It's like a switch got flipped, and suddenly pathways that were dormant or underdeveloped are activating. I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of research." Emma sat in the corner playing with Rex. Officer Mitchell had brought his partner at Maria's request, and Emma hadn't left the dog's side for 2 hours. She was telling Rex a story, rambling and disjointed but recognizable as narrative. Subject, verb, object. Beginning, middle, end. "Good dog listened to Emma's story," she said, patting Rex's head. "Once upon a time there was a girl named Emma. Emma was quiet. Emma didn't talk. Then Emma meet dog. Dog is magic. Dog help Emma find words hiding inside." Maria's throat tightened. Emma understood. On some level, their 3-year-old daughter understood what had happened to her. By Monday evening, Emma's vocabulary had exploded. Dr. Chen's language specialist counted over 200 distinct words, up from the approximately 30 Emma had used on Saturday. She was forming complex sentences, asking questions, expressing preferences. I want juice, please. Mama, where Dada go? Rex's best dog in whole world. When we go home, Emma tired. Each sentence was a small miracle. Each word was proof that the impossible had happened. The media frenzy intensified. Their apartment building was surrounded by news vans. Reporters camped outside, waiting for a statement. The Rodriguez family couldn't leave without being mobbed. Their landlord, Mr. Chen, stood guard at the front door, refusing to let anyone in. On Tuesday, Marcus Williams's mother called. Her 7-year-old son had been nonverbal his entire life. Please, she begged Maria, can my son meet this dog? I saw what happened to Emma. Maybe it could help Marcus too. Maria looked at Officer Mitchell, who'd basically moved into their apartment with Rex, protecting them from the chaos. It's not up to me, she said. Officer Mitchell. Mitchell rubbed his face, exhausted. He hadn't slept in 3 days. His captain had put him on administrative leave, not as punishment, but because the department couldn't handle the flood of requests coming in. Everyone wanted to meet Rex. Everyone wanted their own miracle. I don't know if it'll work, Mitchell said honestly. I don't know why it worked with Emma, but he looked at Rex, who'd been unusually calm through all the chaos, like he understood the gravity of what was happening. Yeah, let's try. Wednesday afternoon, Marcus Williams met Rex at a private facility, away from cameras and crowds. The boy approached the dog cautiously, his mother holding her breath. Rex did the same thing he'd done with Emma, lowered himself to the ground, bowed, waited. Marcus reached out, touched Rex's fur. And after 20 minutes of silent connection, he looked at his mother and said, "Hi, Mama." She collapsed, just dropped to the floor sobbing. 2 children, 2 miracles, 2 families given back their children's voices. Dr. Chen immediately called an emergency press conference. We're witnessing something extraordinary here. This isn't coincidence. There's something about the interaction between these specific children and this specific dog that's triggering neurological changes we don't yet understand. The autism community exploded. Half celebrated, calling it a breakthrough. The other half urged caution, warning about false hope and unproven treatments. Dr. Richard Strauss, a prominent child psychologist from Yale, appeared on CNN Tuesday night. This is dangerous, he said firmly. Autism is a complex neurological condition. The idea that a dog can cure it is not only scientifically unfounded, it's irresponsible. These families are vulnerable, desperate. We can't give them false hope based on 2 anecdotal cases. But by Wednesday night there were 3 cases, then 4. Other families who'd arranged meetings with Rex reported similar breakthroughs. Not every child spoke, some made sounds, some signed, some just showed increased responsiveness. But something was happening, something real. The National Institutes of Health announced an emergency $5 million grant for research. Officer Mitchell's captain called him back to the station, not to work patrol, but to discuss something bigger. Mitchell, Captain Rodriguez said, I'm recommending we create a specialized unit. You and Rex working full-time on this, whatever this is. We've had requests from 300 cities. The department's phones are ringing off the hook. If there's even a chance this can help more kids. Mitchell looked at Rex, sleeping peacefully under his desk despite the chaos surrounding them. His partner, his friend, his miracle worker. Yeah, Mitchell said, let's do it. Emma's story had started with 2 words. Now it was becoming a movement. Dr. Patricia Chen stood before the hospital's ethics board, her hands trembling slightly as she presented her proposal. Behind her, a PowerPoint displayed brain scans, video footage, and statistical data that should have been impossible. What we're proposing is unprecedented, she began. A controlled study involving 5 nonverbal autistic children, 5 trained police K9s, and 6 weeks of daily interaction. We'll monitor brain activity, language development, and behavioral changes in real time. Board member Dr. Feldman leaned forward, skeptical. Dr. Chen, you're asking us to approve an experiment based on what amounts to viral videos and anecdotal evidence. Where's the scientific basis? The scientific basis is sitting in the waiting room, Dr. Chen replied, pulling up a new slide. Emma Rodriguez has acquired over 500 words in 5 days. Marcus Williams went from nonverbal to speaking in sentences within 48 hours of his first interaction with Rex. We now have documented cases of 7 children showing significant language breakthroughs after contact with this specific dog. One dog, Dr. Feldman said. You're building a study around one German Shepherd. For now, yes. But Officer Mitchell has identified 4 other K9s from the Columbus Police Department that show similar temperament profiles. We're not claiming this works with all dogs, or even most dogs. We're investigating whether specially trained service animals might trigger neurological responses in autistic children that conventional therapy cannot. The board deliberated for 2 hours. Finally, grudgingly, they approved a limited pilot study. 6 weeks, 5 children, strict protocols. If they saw no measurable results, the study would be terminated immediately. Maria signed the consent forms with shaking hands. Emma would be child subject 1, the baseline, the proof of concept. 4 other families had been selected from over 3,000 applicants. Each child was severely autistic, nonverbal between ages 3 and 8, with no other underlying medical conditions. Subject 2, Marcus Williams, age 7, nonverbal since birth. Single mother, works 2 jobs, lives in subsidized housing. Subject 3, Lily Chen, age 4, diagnosed with severe autism at 18 months. Parents are both physicians who tried every known intervention. Subject 4, Deshawn Turner, age 5. Foster child, history of trauma, hasn't spoken in 3 years. Subject 5, Sophie Martinez, age 6. Wheelchair user with cerebral palsy in addition to autism. Most doctors said she'd never communicate beyond basic gestures. The study began on October 15, 2024, in a specialized facility at Children's Hospital. Each child would spend 1 hour per day with their assigned K9. The sessions would be recorded, monitored, and analyzed by a team of neurologists, speech therapists, and behavioral specialists. Day 1 was chaos. Lily Chen screamed when she saw her assigned dog, a golden retriever named Sergeant Buddy. She screamed for 45 minutes straight, then suddenly went silent, crawled over to Buddy, and pressed her face against his fur. She stayed like that for the remaining 15 minutes, her body relaxed for the first time in the session. Deshawn Turner wouldn't even enter the room. He stood in the doorway staring at his assigned dog, a Belgian Malinois named Duke, with wide, frightened eyes. His foster mother, Mrs. Patterson, tried to coax him in, but Deshawn was frozen. Then Duke did something extraordinary. He turned his back on Deshawn, laid down, and went asleep, just completely ignored the boy. Deshawn watched for 5 minutes, then 10. Then slowly he stepped into the room, then another step. By the end of the session, he was sitting 3 feet from Duke, still silent but present. Sophie Martinez couldn't walk to her dog, so they brought the dog to her. A Labrador named Apollo approached her wheelchair carefully, sniffed her hand, then rested his head on her lap. Sophie's hands, which usually moved in repetitive, self-stimulating patterns, went still. She looked at Apollo for a long moment. Then she signed, "Dog good." Her mother burst into tears. Sophie knew sign language. They'd been teaching her for 2 years, but she'd never used it spontaneously, never initiated communication. And now, because of a dog, she was. By day 3, the data was already significant. Brain scans showed increased activity in language processing centers across all 5 children. 3 of them had made sounds, not words yet, but vocalizations, intent to communicate. Emma, meanwhile, was exploding linguistically. She was now speaking in paragraphs, asking complex questions, engaging in imaginative play. "Mama, when I grow up, I want to help other kids like me," she said one evening, curled up on the couch. "Kids who have words stuck inside. I want to help them find their words." Maria held her daughter close, overwhelmed. 3 weeks ago, Emma had been silent. Now she was talking about her future, about helping others, about purpose and meaning. By day 9, Marcus Williams looked at his mother during a session with Sergeant Buddy and said, "I love you, Mom. I love you so much. I always did, but the words were trapped." His mother fainted, just collapsed on the floor. When she came to, she was laughing and crying simultaneously, clutching Marcus like she'd never let go. "You always loved me," she whispered. "You knew." "I always knew, Mama. I just couldn't tell you. The words were there, but they couldn't come out. It hurt so bad." The research team sat in stunned silence, watching the footage. These children hadn't been empty vessels. They'd been prisoners in their own minds, fully aware, fully feeling, but unable to communicate. And somehow, these dogs had given them the key to their own cages. By week 2, 4 of the 5 children were speaking. Simple words at first, then phrases, then sentences. Deshaun was the holdout, still silent, but his body language had transformed. He smiled now. He made eye contact. He played with Duke, throwing balls, running in circles. Communication without words, but communication nonetheless. Sophie Martinez was using sign language fluently, creating sentences and expressing preferences. "Want juice? Play with Apollo. Love Mama." Her neurologist, Dr. Patel, reviewed her brain scans with disbelief. "The neuroplasticity we're seeing here, it's extraordinary. Her brain is creating new pathways, strengthening existing ones. This level of change in 2 weeks should take months, years even." "So what's causing it?" Dr. Chen asked. "I don't know," Dr. Patel admitted. "The dogs aren't doing anything special, no specific training technique, no commands, they're just present, calm, accepting. Maybe that's enough. Maybe these children have been waiting their whole lives for someone or something that doesn't expect them to be different than they are." Week 3 brought the breakthrough with Deshaun. During a session with Duke, the boy was throwing a tennis ball, laughing silently as Duke retrieved it. The ball rolled under a table. Duke couldn't reach it. Deshaun walked over, got the ball, and held it up. And then, so quietly the microphones almost didn't catch it, he said, "Here." One word, but Mrs. Patterson heard 1,000. By week 4, the study had attracted global attention. Researchers from 15 countries requested access to the data. The NIH tripled their funding. Officer Mitchell was fielding calls from police departments worldwide, all asking about K9 therapy programs. But not everyone was celebrating. Dr. Richard Strauss appeared on national television, his face stern. "This is pseudoscience dressed up as hope. Yes, these children are showing progress, but correlation is not causation. We have no idea if the dogs are actually responsible or if this is simply intensive therapy working. We're giving desperate families false hope, and when this doesn't work for their children, the disappointment will be devastating." The autism community fractured. Some parents demanded access to therapy dogs immediately. Others accused the research team of exploitation, of using vulnerable children as guinea pigs. Maria received death threats. People accused her of faking Emma's autism for attention. Strangers called her a liar, a fraud, a con artist. But then Marcus's neurologist released his brain scans, comparing before and after. The changes were undeniable, measurable, scientifically documented. Marcus's brain showed increased connectivity in language processing regions, changes that previous research had suggested were impossible in children his age. The evidence was mounting, something real was happening. And the world was watching. The backlash hit like a Category 5 hurricane. Dr. Richard Strauss wasn't alone anymore. By week 5 of the study, he'd assembled a coalition of skeptics, psychologists, neurologists, autism researchers, all questioning the validity of Dr. Chen's work. They held their own press conference, standing united in their criticism. "We are deeply concerned about the message this sends to families," Dr. Strauss declared, his voice carrying the weight of academic authority. Autism spectrum disorder is a complex neurological condition. The suggestion that it can be treated, or worse, cured, by interaction with dogs is not only scientifically irresponsible, it's cruel. When this fails to work for the vast majority of children, and it will fail, we'll have thousands of heartbroken families wondering what they did wrong. Dr. Margaret Foster from Johns Hopkins joined him. "I've reviewed the preliminary data from this so-called study. The sample size is absurdly small, 5 children, 5. We're making sweeping conclusions about autism treatment based on 5 cases. That's not science. That's anecdote." The media loved the controversy. CNN hosted debates. The New York Times ran op-eds from both sides. Social media became a battlefield, with parents sharing their own stories of therapy dogs that didn't work, of false hopes and crushed dreams. Maria read the comments on her Facebook page, her stomach churning. "You're lying about your daughter's autism for attention. My son is autistic and dogs terrify him. Stop pretending this works for everyone. This is just another fad that will fade away when people realize it's bullshit." Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama sad." Maria closed her laptop quickly, forcing a smile. "No, baby, Mama's okay." "People mean on computer," Emma observed, her intuition sharp. "They don't believe Emma was quiet before." "Some people don't understand, sweetie. That's okay." But Emma was quiet. Emma couldn't talk. Now Emma can talk lots and lots. That's real. It was real. Maria knew it was real. She'd lived through 3 years of silence. She'd been there when Emma spoke her first words. No internet troll could take that away from her. But the doubt was spreading. Several families withdrew their children from pending studies, afraid of the public scrutiny. Funding sources grew nervous. The hospital's board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss whether to continue the program. Then Marcus Williams's mother did something brave. She released his complete medical records to the public, 3 years of doctor's visits, therapy notes, diagnostic assessments, all documenting Marcus's severe nonverbal autism. She stood in front of cameras with her son beside her and said, "Look at him. Listen to him. This is not fake. This is not for attention. This is my son who couldn't speak for 7 years and now he can. Explain that, Dr. Strauss." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady. "I want to tell the mean doctors something. I was always here. I was always listening. I just couldn't make my mouth work right. Duke helped me. Duke made me feel safe enough to try. And now I can tell my mama I love her. That's not fake. That's real." The video went viral, 20 million views in 48 hours. 3 days later, Dr. James Morrison from Massachusetts General Hospital called Dr. Chen. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was skeptical, but I've been reviewing your brain scans, your language assessments, your longitudinal data. Dr. Chen, this is real. The neuroplasticity you're documenting, I've never seen anything like it." "Will you say that publicly?" Dr. Chen asked. "I'll do better than that. I want to replicate your study at Mass General. If we can show the same results with different children, different dogs, different researchers, that's when the skeptics will have to listen." The replication began immediately. 10 children, 10 therapy dogs, 8 weeks. Same protocols, different location, different team. By week 3 of the Massachusetts study, 6 children had spoken their first words. Dr. Strauss appeared on CNN again, but this time his certainty had cracked. The Massachusetts results are compelling. I'm not ready to say I was wrong, but I'm willing to admit there may be something here that warrants further investigation." It wasn't a full retraction, but it was enough. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. Week 6 of the original study, Deshawn Turner, the quietest, most traumatized child, sat with Duke during their session. Mrs. Patterson had brought a photo album, showing Deshawn pictures of his biological mother, who died when he was 3. That's when he'd stopped talking, the day she died. Deshawn looked at the pictures silently, his small hand resting on Duke's fur. Then he pointed to a photo of his mother smiling. "She looks like Mama Patterson," Duke's handler said gently. "Both your mamas love you very much." Deshawn's face crumpled, tears rolled down his cheeks, and then in a voice rough from 3 years of disuse he said, "Mama died. Mama left Deshawn alone. It hurt so bad I couldn't talk anymore. The words hurt too much." Mrs. Patterson dropped to her knees, pulling him into her arms. "Oh, baby, oh, my sweet baby, she didn't want to leave you. She loved you so much." "I know," Deshawn sobbed. "I always knew, but I couldn't say it. I couldn't say anything. Everything hurt. But Duke doesn't hurt. Duke just loves me." The research team watched through the observation window, every single person crying. This wasn't just about autism. This was about trauma, about grief, about children who'd lost their voices for reasons science barely understood. And somehow these dogs, these patient, loving, accepting dogs, were giving those voices back. Dr. Chen released Deshawn's brain scans the next day, comparing them to his intake assessment. The changes were extraordinary. His amygdala, the brain's fear center, showed decreased activity. His language centers showed massive increases in connectivity. The physical evidence of healing was right there, visible in the neural pathways lighting up on the screen. Dr. Strauss called Dr. Chen personally. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Not about everything. We still need more research, larger studies, better controls. But I was wrong to dismiss this so completely. Something profound is happening here." That afternoon, the National Institutes of Health announced $50 million in funding for expanded research. The CDC issued a statement supporting further investigation into animal-assisted therapy for autism and childhood trauma. Police departments in 38 states requested training for therapy K-9 programs. And in Columbus, Ohio, Emma Rodriguez sat with Rex in her living room, reading him a story she'd written herself. It was called The Girl Who Found Her Voice, and it was about a little girl who'd been silent until she met a magical dog who taught her it was safe to speak. "The end," Emma said, closing her homemade book. "Do you like my story, Rex?" Rex's tail thumped against the floor. "I think he loves it," Maria said, her heart full. Officer Mitchell, sitting nearby, smiled. "He definitely does." 3 months ago, Emma had been silent. Marcus had been silent. Deshawn had been trapped in his trauma. Sophie had been locked in her body. Lily had been screaming. Now they were all speaking, signing, communicating, living. The skeptics had demanded proof. Science had provided it. And somewhere, in cities across America, other children were meeting their own special dogs, beginning their own journeys from silence to speech. The revolution had begun. Emma Rodriguez stood at the entrance of Maple Grove Elementary School, her frozen backpack hanging from her shoulders, her hand gripping her mother's tightly. But this grip wasn't fear. It was excitement barely contained. "Mama, do I really get to go to school with other kids? Regular school?" Maria's eyes filled with tears, happy ones this time. "Yes, baby, regular kindergarten with regular kids, because you're ready." 5 years. 5 years since those 2 words at Goodell Park had shattered their world of silence and rebuilt it into something beautiful. Emma was now 8 years old, speaking in complex sentences, reading at a 3rd grade level, and about to start mainstream kindergarten with minimal support services. The school principal, Mrs. Davidson, waited by the door. "Emma, we're so excited you're here. Your classroom is ready and Mrs. Murphy can't wait to meet you." Emma waved goodbye to Maria and skipped, actually skipped into the building. Maria watched her disappear through the doors, then leaned against Carlos's shoulder and sobbed. "She's in regular school," Maria whispered. "Carlos, our daughter is in regular school." "I know," he said, his own voice thick. "I know." 3 years ago, they'd been told Emma would need lifelong specialized care, that she'd probably never live independently, that their dreams of normalcy were fantasies. Now their daughter was reading Harry Potter and asking for piano lessons. Across town, at the Columbus Police Department's new Canine Therapy Center, Officer Jake Mitchell walked through the facility with pride swelling in his chest. What had started as him and Rex in a park had become this: a 15,000-square-foot center with 12 therapy rooms, a staff of 20, and programs serving 200 families. Rex, now 7 years old and mostly gray around the muzzle, walked beside him with the dignity of an elder statesman. He'd officially retired from active police duty 2 years ago, but retirement for Rex meant full-time work as a therapy dog. He still came to the center 3 days a week, still worked with special children, still performed his inexplicable magic. "Morning, Mitchell," Sarah Chen, the center's director and Dr. Patricia Chen's daughter, waved from her office. "We have 3 new families starting today, and you'll never guess who called the White House. They want to feature Rex in their mental health awareness campaign." Mitchell shook his head, still amazed. "The White House? Rex, buddy, you're famous." Rex's tail wagged slowly, unimpressed by fame. He'd always known his worth. The center had a waiting list of 500 families. They trained 47 therapy dogs, not just police K9s anymore, but specially selected and trained dogs from shelters, rescue organizations, and service dog programs. The success rate wasn't 100%. It never would be. But it was significant. Approximately 60% of nonverbal autistic children who went through the program showed measurable language improvements. Some spoke their first words. Others learned sign language. Some improved their communication through augmentative devices. Every breakthrough mattered. Marcus Williams, now 12 years old, volunteered at the center after school. He'd written a book about his experience, 7 Years of Silence, How a Dog Named Buddy Saved My Life, and donated all proceeds to autism research. He wanted to be a speech therapist when he grew up, to help other kids find their voices the way he'd found his. "Mr. Mitchell," Marcus called out, entering the center with Sergeant Buddy, who was now his official service dog. "Ready for the presentation." Today was special. They were hosting a congressional delegation investigating the effectiveness of animal-assisted therapy. The findings from 5 years of research would be presented, thousands of data points, hundreds of success stories, peer-reviewed studies from 12 major universities. The delegation arrived at 10 a.m., 8 senators, 12 representatives, and a crowd of staff members. They toured the facility, watched therapy sessions through observation windows, and reviewed the compiled research. Senator Patricia Walsh from California, whose own grandson was autistic, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched a 6-year-old girl speak her first sentence to a golden retriever named Hope. "This is extraordinary," she said to Mitchell. "We need to make this available nationwide." That afternoon, in front of cameras and reporters, Senator Walsh introduced the Canine Therapy for Autism Act, federal funding for therapy dog programs in all 50 states, insurance coverage for animal-assisted therapy, and grants for continued research. Emma Rodriguez, dressed in her Sunday best, stood before the microphone. 5 years ago she couldn't speak. Now she was addressing Congress. "My name is Emma Rodriguez," she began, her voice clear and confident. 5 years ago I was trapped in silence. I had thoughts and feelings, but I couldn't share them with anyone. I couldn't tell my mama I loved her. I couldn't tell my dada about my day. I couldn't ask for help when I was scared." She paused, looking at Rex, who sat beside Officer Mitchell at the back of the room. "Then I met Rex, and something changed inside me. I felt safe. I felt understood. And suddenly the words that had been trapped inside me for 3 years could finally come out. I said, "Good dog," and my whole life changed. Emma looked directly at the cameras. There are so many kids like me, kids who have words trapped inside them, kids who want to talk but can't. This program can help them. It helped me. It helped my friend Marcus. It helped hundreds of kids. Please help it reach more kids. The room erupted in applause. Every representative, every senator stood and clapped. Senator Walsh wiped her eyes openly. The bill passed unanimously, the first time in 47 years that Congress had agreed on anything unanimously. The Canine Therapy for Autism Act became law 3 months later. By the end of the year, Pause for Words programs existed in 847 cities across the United States. 12 other countries had started similar programs. Over 3,000 children had participated, and 1,847 had shown measurable improvements in communication. Officer Mitchell's book, 2 Words That Changed Everything, became a bestseller. All proceeds funded scholarships for therapy dog trainers and provided free services to families who couldn't afford treatment. Maria Rodriguez became a national advocate for autism awareness, speaking at conferences and helping families navigate the therapy dog program. Carlos had been promoted to plant supervisor, their financial struggles finally behind them. And Emma was thriving. She had friends at school. She played soccer on the weekends. She loved art class and science experiments. She was loud and opinionated and funny, everything Maria had dreamed of during those 3 years of silence. One Saturday evening, 5 years to the day after that moment at Goodell Park, the Rodriguez family visited Officer Mitchell and Rex at his home. Emma brought her favorite book, the Harry Potter series she'd now read 3 times. "Rex," she said, settling onto the floor beside the old dog, "want to hear a story?" Rex's tail thumped weakly. He was getting old, slowing down, but his eyes still held that same gentle wisdom. Emma read aloud while Rex rested his head on her lap. When she finished a chapter, she closed the book and hugged him. "Thank you, Rex," she whispered. "Thank you for helping me find my voice. I love you so much." Maria watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face, but happy tears now, always happy tears. Officer Mitchell stood beside her. "You know what amazes me most," he said quietly. "It all started with 2 words, just 2 simple words." Maria smiled. "Good dog." "Good dog," Mitchell agreed, looking at Rex with infinite love and gratitude. 2 words that had changed one little girl's life. 2 words that had sparked a revolution. 2 words that had given hope to thousands of families drowning in silence. 2 words that proved miracles weren't just possible, they were happening every single day. Emma looked up at her mother, her eyes bright. "Mama, when I grow up, I want to work with therapy dogs. I want to help other kids like Rex helped me." "You can be anything you want, baby," Maria said. "Anything at all." Because Emma had her voice now, and she was never going to be silent again. The end.